What happens when Hollywood's most beloved star walks into what should be a simple morning talk show interview only to face an ambush that nobody saw coming? In just 44 seconds, one comment from the host would ignite a firestorm that turned a friendly chat into an absolute disaster, exposing the true colors of someone who thought they were untouchable. The studio lights were bright that morning. The audience was buzzing with excitement. Dwayne Johnson, known to millions as The Rock, walked onto the set with his trademark smile. He waved to the crowd. They went wild. This was supposed to be easy. A quick conversation about his new movie, some laughs, maybe a funny story or two. But from the moment he sat down, something felt different. Whoopi Goldberg sat at the center of the table on The View. Her co-hosts flanked her on both sides. Joy Behar sat to her left, arms crossed. Sunny Hostin was next to Joy, looking through. Some notes. Sarah N. sat on the right side, smiling nervously. Ana Navarro was at the end, her expression unreadable. The energy at the table was tense. Dwayne could feel it, but he's a professional. He's done thousands of interviews. He knows how to handle anything. Or so he thought. So Dwayne, Whoopi started, not even looking up from her cards. Welcome to The View. Thank you for having me, Dwayne said warmly. It's great to be here with all of you ladies. The audience clapped. Dwayne smiled wider. He was trying to bring good energy to the table, but Whoopi wasn't matching it. Your new movie is out, Whoopi continued, her tone flat. Another action film, another exploding building, another paycheck, I guess. The audience went quiet. That wasn't a question. That was a jab. Dwayne's smile stayed on his face, but his eyes changed. He'd been in this business long enough to recognize disrespect when he heard it. Well, Dwayne said carefully, I think audiences enjoy these films because they're fun. They're an escape. People work hard all week, and sometimes they just want to sit back and watch something entertaining. Entertaining, Whoopi repeated, like the word tasted bad in her mouth. Is that what we're calling it now? Joy? Jumped in, sensing the tension. What Whoopi means is, do you ever think about doing more serious work? Something with, substance? Dwayne turned to Joy, his posture still relaxed, but his jaw tightening slightly. I've done dramatic work. I've done comedies. I've done family films. I choose projects that I believe in. Projects that my daughters can watch and be proud of their dad. Your daughters, Whoopi said, leaning back in her chair. Right? Because nothing says good parenting like teaching your kids that money is more important than art. The audience gasped. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Even Anna looked shocked. Sat crossed a line. Dwayne's kids were off limits, and everyone knew it. But Whoopi had just gone there on live television in front of millions of people. Dwayne's smile disappeared completely. His entire demeanor changed. The warmth that he'd walked in with was gone, replaced by something colder, something harder. Excuse me? His voice was quiet, but firm. Oh, did I strike a nerve? Whoopi asked. A slight smirk on her face. She seemed almost pleased with herself, like she'd accomplished something. Like making a guest uncomfortable was the goal all along. Joy tried again. Whoopi, come on. Let's just, no. Joy, Whoopi interrupted without even looking at her. I think this is important. I think we need to talk about this. About how Hollywood has become this machine that just churns out garbage and calls it entertainment. And people like Dwayne here are happy to feed that machine as long as the checks keep coming. People like me, Dwayne repeated slowly. Each word was measured. Careful. What exactly do you mean by that? You heard me, Whoopi said, finally looking directly at him. You're one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood. You make these mindless movies that require zero talent. Just muscles and a smile. And you're teaching your daughters that that's success. Dwayne took a breath. A deep one. The kind you take when you're trying to keep your composure. When you're trying not to say something you'll regret. The cameras were tight on his face. Every emotion flickering across it was being broadcast to millions. "Let me make sure I understand," Spain said, his voice still controlled but with an edge now. "You think you know how I'm raising my daughters? You think you know what I teach them? I know what they see," Whoopi shot back. "They see their father making silly action movies. They see him doing shampoo commercials. Asterisk, they see him caring more about his brand than his craft." "My craft," Dwayne Johnson said, leaning forward slightly. "Do you know how many hours I train for these roles? Do you know how many stunts I do myself? Do you know how many times I've been injured on set and kept going because I didn't want to let the crew down? Do you know anything about the actual work that goes into what I do?" "I know it's not real acting," Whoopi Goldberg said dismissively. She waved her hand like she was swatting away a fly, like his words meant nothing. "Running and jumping and looking tough. Not acting. That's just physical labor with a camera pointed at you." The studio was dead silent. The cameras kept rolling. The producers in the control room were probably losing their minds. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't how interviews were supposed to go. But Whoopi wasn't stopping. She was digging in deeper. "I think," Dwayne said slowly, his voice low and controlled, "that you're out of line." "Am I?" Whoopi shot back. "Or am I just saying what everyone else is thinking? You're not a real actor, Dwayne. You're a brand. You're a walking, talking action figure, and frankly, it's insulting to those of us who actually take our craft seriously." Sonny Hostin tried to intervene. "Whoopi, maybe we should move on to..." "No." Whoopi cut her off sharply. "I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of sitting here and acting like these people deserve the same respect as real artists. He's a wrestler who got lucky. That's it. He has no training, no real experience. He just showed up with big muscles and a nice smile, and Hollywood threw money at him." "A wrestler who got lucky," Dwayne repeated. His jaw was clenched. Now, his hands were gripping the armrests of his chair. "That's what you think this is?" "Luck. What else would you call it?" Whoopi challenged. "You didn't go to acting school. You didn't do theater. You didn't pay your dues the way real actors do. You just walked in because you were famous for throwing people around. In a ring." Sarah N. was gripping her notes so tightly the paper was crumpling. Joy Behar had her eyes closed like she couldn't bear to watch. Anna Navarro was staring at Whoopi with something close to horror, but Whoopi kept going. "My daughters," Dwayne said, his voice dropping even lower. "Watch me work. They watch me treat every single person on set with respect. The grips, the cameramen, the extras, everyone. They watch me show up early and stay late. They watch me sign autographs for every fan who asks. They watch me use my platform to try to make people's lives better, to make them smile, to give them hope. That's what I'm teaching them. That's what they see." "Oh, nice," Whoopi said sarcastically. "So humble. He's so perfect. Tell me, do you practice that speech in the mirror?" That was it. That was the moment. Everyone in the studio could feel it, the shift, the breaking point. Dwayne's face changed. Not with anger exactly, but with something deeper. Disappointment maybe, or sadness. The look of someone who had tried to be reasonable and realized there was no point. Dwayne stood up, not quickly. Not aggressively, but with purpose, deliberate. Controlled. The entire audience watched as he reached for his microphone pack. His hands were steady. His movements were calm. But everything about his body language said this was over. "I've been disrespected before," Dwayne said, his voice carrying across the studio without him even raising it. Every word was clear. Every syllable landed with weight. "I grew up with nothing. My family was evicted from our apartment when I was 14 years old. I watched my mother cry because she didn't know how we'd eat. I played football in college with a torn shoulder because my family needed me to keep that scholarship. We couldn't afford to lose it. I had dreams of playing in the NFL. I watched those dreams die when I got cut. I slept in my car when I had $7 in my pocket. $7. That's all I had in the world. He paused. The studio was so quiet you could hear people breathing. I worked my way up from nothing, he continued, and I did it with respect. Respect for the business. Respect for the people I worked with. Respect for the audience who chose to support me. And respect for myself. Dwayne Johnson paused, letting the words settle. I never forgot where I came from. Never forgot what it felt like to have nothing. And I made a promise to myself that if I ever made it, if I ever got the chance to be successful, I would never let success change who I was. I would never become the kind of person who looks down on others, who judges others, who tears others down to build myself up. He unclipped his microphone and placed it carefully on the table. The small thud it made seemed louder than it should have been. I came here today as a guest, Dwayne said, making eye contact with each of the women sitting at the table of the view. I came here to talk about a movie that hundreds of people worked on. People who have families to feed. Stunt coordinators who spent months choreographing every fight. Stunt performers who risked their lives to make those scenes look real. Cinematographers who wake up at 4 a.m. to get the perfect shot. Editors who spend months in dark rooms making sure every frame is perfect. Visual effects artists who work overtime to create worlds that don't exist. Costume designers, makeup artists, set builders. He looked around the studio. Every single one of them poured their heart into this project. And you sit there in your comfortable chair with your guaranteed paycheck. And you insult all of them. You insult their work. You insult me. And worst of all, you bring my children into it. You question my parenting. You act like you know anything about my family or my values. Whoopi Goldberg opened her mouth to respond, but Dwayne lifted his hand, not aggressively. Just a simple gesture that said, "Wait." "I don't need to hear it," he said firmly. "I've heard enough. You want to talk about real artists? Let me tell you about real artists. Real artists lift each other up. Real artists understand there's room for everyone. There's room for serious dramas that make you think. There's room for fun action movies that make you smile. There's room for independent films that push boundaries. There's room for blockbusters that bring families together. There's room for comedies and tragedies and everything in between. Real artists don't tear other people down to make themselves feel important. Real artists don't use their platform as a weapon. Real artists don't hide behind the excuse of asking tough questions when really they're just being cruel." He took a slow breath. The audience sat frozen. Some people had tears in their eyes. Not because it was sad exactly, but because they were witnessing something real, something raw. Something that rarely happened on television. You talk about me not being a real actor, Dwayne continued. You talk about me not having training or experience. But let me ask you something. Have you ever had to learn an entire language for a role? Because I have. Have you ever had to train for 6 months straight, 7 days a week, to transform your body into something completely different? Because I have. Have you ever had to do take after take of a stunt that could seriously hurt you if one thing goes wrong? 'Cause I have. Have you ever had to carry an entire movie on your shoulders, knowing that if it fails, hundreds of people might not work again? Because I have. Joy Behar was openly crying now. Sarah N. nodded slightly. Sunny Hostin had her hand over her mouth. Anna Navarro kept watching Whoopi, waiting to see how she would respond. But Whoopi just sat there. Her arms were crossed. Her face was stoned. She didn't look sorry. She didn't look embarrassed. She looked annoyed, like Dwayne was the problem, like he was the one overreacting. Joy stared at her hands. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear. Sunny slowly shook her head. Anna's eyes were wide. And Whoopi, Dwayne said quietly. You know what the sad part is? His voice softened, but the weight of it didn't fade. I actually used to respect you. Not just respect you. I admired you. I grew up watching you. My mother loved you. We'd sit together and watch your movies, watch your stand-up, watch you on this very show. I thought you were brilliant, funny, talented, fearless. Real. Asterisk. I thought you were someone who used their voice to make things better, to lift people up, to shine a light on important issues. I thought you understood what it meant to struggle, to overcome, to rise above. Dwayne Johnson shook his head slowly. The disappointment on his face was clear. But this, he continued, this isn't any of that. This isn't brave. This isn't fearless. This is just mean. This is just someone who's been in the spotlight so long that they forgot what it's like to treat people with basic human decency. You forgot what it's like to be kind. You forgot that words have power, that you can hurt people with. Them that just because you can say something doesn't mean you should. The audience sat in complete silence. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was real life unfolding in real time. Are you done? Whoopi Goldberg asked coldly. Yeah, Dwayne said. I'm done. I'm done with this interview. I'm done with this table. I'm done pretending that this kind of behavior is acceptable just because you're famous. He turned toward the audience. Many had their hands over their mouths. Others were filming with their phones. Within minutes, this moment would be everywhere online. I apologize to all of you, Dwayne said to the crowd. You came here expecting a fun show. You deserved better than this. I hope you understand why I can't stay. At first, the audience clapped slowly, then louder, then people started standing. Within seconds, the entire studio audience was on its feet, applauding as Dwayne walked toward the exit. It was extraordinary, people cheering for a guest who had just walked off a major talk show. They were making it clear whose side they were on. Whoopi's face turned red. Sit down. She snapped at the audience. Sit down right now. But they didn't. The clapping continued. Some people even cheered. Whoopi looked toward her co-hosts on The View, searching for support, but none of them were looking at her joy. Behar stared at the table. Sarah N. wiped tears from her eyes. Sunny Hostin watched Dwayne walk away with something like admiration on her face. Anna Navarro was the only one who met Whoopi's eyes, and she slowly shook her head. Fine, Whoopi snapped. Leave, see if I care. You're just another celebrity with a fragile ego who can't handle real questions. Dwayne stopped at the edge of the stage. He didn't turn around. He just spoke over his shoulder loud enough for everyone to hear. Those weren't real questions, he said calmly. Those were attacks. There's a difference. And the fact that you can't see that tells me everything I need to know. Then he walked out. Backstage crew members stood frozen as he passed them. Producers were scrambling, trying to figure out what to do next. Within moments, he was in his car and gone. Just like that, Dwayne Johnson walked away from one of the biggest daytime shows on television because he refused to accept disrespect. Back in the studio, chaos erupted. Producers were shouting into their headsets. The director was trying to figure out how to fill the remaining time at the table. The co-hosts sat in uncomfortable silence. Well, Whoopi finally said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I guess we know who can't handle the heat. Joy slowly turned toward her. Whoopi, that was too far. What? Whoopi asked, genuinely surprised. You brought up his kids, Sunny said quietly. You questioned his parenting on live television? What did you think was going to happen? I was making a point, Whoopi insisted. You were being cruel, Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. There's a difference between asking tough questions and just being mean. That was mean. Anna finally spoke. I've interviewed presidents. I've gone head-to-head with senators. I've asked hard questions to powerful people. But I have never made it personal like that. You attacked him as a person. You attacked his family. That's not journalism. That's not even good television. That's just ugly. Whoopi looked around the table. All four of her co-hosts were staring back at her, disappointed, frustrated. Stunned, the audience was still murmuring. The entire energy of the room had changed. Are you all seriously taking his side? Whoopi demanded. There shouldn't be sides, Joy said. He was a guest, our guest, and you ambushed him. I asked questions, Whoopi protested. No, Sonny corrected firmly. You insulted him repeatedly. His career, his choices, his parenting. You kept pushing until he had no choice but to leave. He always had a choice, Whoopi replied. Tay chose to walk out like a child throwing a tantrum. He chose to have self-respect, Anna said calmly. Something you apparently lost sight of today. Producers began waving frantically from off-camera. They needed to go to commercial immediately. We need to take a break, Sarah said, turning toward the camera, trying to maintain professionalism despite her shaking hands. We'll be right back. The moment the show cut to commercial, Whoopi stood up. I don't need to sit here and be lectured by all of you. Then don't, Joy said wearily. But you need to understand what you just did. That man has never been in a scandal. He's known for being kind to fans, to crew members, to other actors. Everyone in Hollywood has a story about how nice Dwayne Johnson is.